Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media.
Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the rugged wilderness of the Gallatin Range, deep in the heart of what would later become the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. The year is 1850, and this land is as wild and unforgiving as any in the world. Vast forests of lodgepole pines stretch across the landscape, interspersed with aspen groves and towering Douglas firs. The ground is thick with shrubs like chokecherry, serviceberry, and wild rose, which grow in abundance, attracting herbivores and the predators that hunt them. The climate in this region is as unpredictable as the terrain itself. Summers are warm and dry, but sudden thunderstorms can bring torrential rain and dangerous winds. By autumn, the air grows cold, especially as the sun dips behind the mountains, and winter comes swiftly. This is a place where grizzly bears roam freely, preparing for their long hibernation as the seasons change. Elk, deer, and bison are common sights, but today, the grizzly bear is at the center of our story. Field Isaacs, a seasoned fur trapper, set out on an expedition in the autumn of 1850. Isaacs had been trapping for years in these remote areas, navigating the harsh landscape with only the basics, his traps, a knife, and the knowledge he had gathered over a lifetime of wilderness experience. He was unmarried, known to travel alone, and was highly respected among other trappers for his skill and resilience. On this particular journey, Isaacs was armed with his rifle, but that took several seconds to reload, so he relied on his bowie knife for anything pressing. He also relied on his sharp senses and survival instincts. No dog accompanied him on this expedition, making him truly alone in the wild. The events leading up to Isaac's death remain a mystery, but the scene that greeted those who found him was a grim one. Isaacs had been walking through the dense woods when he likely surprised a male grizzly bear near its food source. The bear, protective of its territory and possibly preparing for hibernation, responded with a violent and deadly attack. Isaacs had been engaged in setting his traplines when the bear encountered him. His pack lay scattered nearby, and his broken knife was found bloodied in his hand. He tried to defend himself, delivering a series of serious wounds to the bear's neck and shoulder, but it wasn't enough. The bear, weighing over 1,300 pounds, had delivered devastating blows to Isaac's torso and limbs, leaving deep gashes that no human could have survived. The struggle ended in both their deaths, a tragic outcome for both man and beast. Field Isaac's body was found by a group of fellow trappers, who had been searching for him after he'd failed to return to camp. His injuries were consistent with a bear attack, deep claw marks across his chest and arms, bite wounds on his legs, but the fatal wound was a crushed skull, as he was found with his head still in the grizzly's jaws. The bear was found also dead from the injuries Isaacs had inflicted with his knife. Upon inspection, it was determined that the bear was estimated to weigh over 1,300 pounds, in good health, and preparing for hibernation. There was no mention of any animal carcass being cached near Isaac's body, and no cubs were reportedly found in the area. Speaking of cubs, our Cub Tier membership on Patreon, linked below, will give you ad-free early access to our episodes. And the $3 per month goes a long way in helping me continue to produce educational and entertaining content like this. In 1850, there were no official records of bear populations in the region, but it is estimated that the grizzly bear population was much higher than it is today, likely numbering in the thousands across the greater Yellowstone area. Montana, in its vastness, had millions of acres of wilderness, providing prime habitat for bears. While bear attacks are not formally documented during this period, the oral histories of trappers and Native American tribes recount numerous encounters with grizzlies, many of which ended in death or severe injury. Field Isaac's bear attack is detailed in the autobiography of Colonel William Smith, also known as Rebel Bill. Fatal bear attacks were a constant threat to those who ventured into the wild, but they were still relatively rare compared to the number of people who lived and worked in bear country. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Could Field Isaacs have survived this attack had he been accompanied by another trapper, spouse, or partner? Would modern weapons have made a difference in this case? How did the rapid expansion of fur trapping and hunting in the 1800s contribute to increased encounters between humans and grizzly bears? And could anything have been done to prevent such conflicts? I will gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the headwaters of Rock Creek in the Gros Ventre Range in western Wyoming. The creek is about 9 miles as the crow flies to the nearest primitive road, let alone any civilization. This country is high elevation, with the hilltops reaching just under 10,000 feet. Ribbons of pine, fir, and spruce trees dance along meadows of grass and sagebrush wherever the wind blows. Common animals here include mule deer, elk, and moose. Dominant predators in the area include black bears, coyotes, cougars, wolves, and the apex predator anywhere it steps, the grizzly bear. On the evening of Friday, October 21st, 2022, 65-year-old Lee Francis was deer hunting with his 40-year-old son Josh. They were both dentists and avid outdoorsmen. Josh owned his own practice in Pinedale and was happy to follow in his father's footsteps professionally. Lee and Josh had plenty of run-ins with bears over the years. Just a few weeks ago, they'd had a grizzly wander into camp and spook their horses. They also bluffed a different grizzly away from them during a tense standoff while they were hunting. Lee had hunted brown bears in Alaska with his bow and black bears the year prior in Idaho. He had a great lesson on why hard-cast bullets were the only ammo to pack for self-defense from a bear. One of his family members had wounded a black bear and pulled out his 10mm pistol loaded with hollow-point bullets to finish off the bear. With a few shots to the head, the black bear expired, but as the men skinned its carcass, they noticed the hollow points had mushroomed just beneath the hide. The black bear likely died from the shot to its vitals more than from the 10mm hollow point shots to its head. This is when he researched hard-cast bullets for his Glock 10mm and purchased some soon thereafter. Lee's carried bear spray in the past, but today was a windy day, so he left it behind. The men had spent the day hunting around the timberline all day, riding their horses and mules between glassing sites. They had tags for a sought-after mule deer unit, and there were some dandies hiding in the brush. It just took time to glass the hills to find them and work your way into a good shot. Leaving their pack string along a trail near the tree line, the hunters climbed a short rise to get a good view of the valley. After Josh began glassing, Lee decided he would go get the horses. As he walked down the slope, he kept his eyes up, still looking for that elusive muley buck. He crossed the point of a small rise and glanced down to a big pile of disturbed dirt right in front of him. He could see huge grizzly bear tracks in the dirt and knew he had just walked upon a grizzly bear den. Lee muttered the first half of every cuss word he knew as he carefully tried to back away silently. As he stepped backward, he pulled out his Glock from its holster, worked the action, and chambered around. A little information about grizzly bear behavior in Wyoming is in order to understand Lee's predicament. Grizzlies in the Rockies choose dens on the northern slopes, located between 7,000 and 10,000 feet in elevation. The reason for this is that the snow on the northern face of a mountain doesn't tend to melt as much and provides better insulation for the bears. Grizzlies will dig into the hillside at the base of a tree or in a patch of brush, moving over a ton of earth and rocks over several days. The opening will be just big enough for the bear to squeeze through, and the den will be open a little wider, several feet past the opening. This preserves heat that escapes from the bear's body during torpor. Now in a slow retreat, Lee watched as a grizzly bear muzzle began protruding from the den opening. An enormous grizzly head soon popped out of the hole and began sniffing the air. Lee knew he was far too close to fool that grizzly's sense of smell, and his heart dropped as the grizzly snapped its head directly toward him. From that point on, the bear's movements became a blur of snapping jaws and swiping claws. As the grizzly approached, Lee lifted his left leg in a defensive kick to keep the bear's head from getting too close to him. The bear had already covered about 12 feet in distance between them in what seemed like no time. Lee had 13 rounds in the magazine and one in the chamber of the 10mm loaded with 130-grain hard-cast bullets, and managed to fire 4 of them by the time the bear was only 1 foot from the muzzle of his pistol. Just after Lee's fourth shot, the bear plowed into him, sending him flying onto his back. The man kicked at the bear and continued to fire his pistol, hoping to hit the bear in the head. He fired at point-blank range and was cocksure he'd struck that bear several times. After several shots, the grizzly spun on its heels and disappeared over a small rise. That's when Lee's pain kicked in. The bear had swatted him on his left thigh and didn't seem to gash him anywhere with its claws. It didn't manage to get any part of Lee's body in its mouth, so the pain in his lower leg confused him. Upon hearing Lee's pistol shots, Josh came running to see what was going on. He could see his father lying on his back, still holding his pistol, but nothing threatening anywhere near him. He asked his father what had happened, and listened as his father explained he'd been attacked by a grizzly bear. Josh asked him if he was all right, and Lee explained that his lower left leg was hurting. Josh examined Lee's leg and could see a hole just below the inside of his calf muscle and a larger exit wound just above his ankle on the outside of his leg. Given their medical background, they both knew the bones in his lower leg were broken by the way it was bent awkwardly. Josh worked quickly to slow Lee's bleeding and dress his wounds. It was clear Lee was in no shape to hike out, and that the horses were the only way he'd be able to make it to medical attention. Josh helped Lee to his feet after fetching the mule of their pack train. Each time they tried to lift Lee onto the back of the mule, his leg would twist, and pain would shoot through his body. As he led the pack mule, Josh reached out for help on the satellite phone. The Sublette County Sheriff and Tip Top Search and Rescue directed the hunters to Water Dog Lakes. Due to inclement weather, the rescue helicopter couldn't fly into their location. The SAR team was heading toward the lakes on UTV from Flying A Ranch, and were hoping to beat the storm rolling into the area. The hike to Water Dog Lakes took 3 hours, but as soon as the hunters arrived, they found the SAR team. They loaded Lee into the UTV and sped down the mountain toward the waiting helicopter at the base. After arriving at the medevac helicopter, Lee was flown to the University of Utah Hospital to be treated for his gunshot wound. The bruises from the bear's attack on his thigh didn't need to be treated and would heal in time. In 2 surgeries, a metal rod was placed into Lee's foot and lower leg. As soon as his pain subsided enough, he planned to drive himself home from the hospital, back to Evanston. Following the incident, wildlife officers were notified and initiated an investigation into the bear attack. It had snowed the night after Lee's attack, which covered much of any evidence left of the attack. The agents couldn't find any evidence that the bear was injured or killed. They concluded their investigation, labeling the bear's attack a defensive one, and Lee's attacks justifiable in defense of his own life. As far as returning to the location, Lee indicated that Josh would return the following Friday to fill his deer tag. Regrettably, he would have to go alone this time. Lee states that he'll return to the backcountry after he heals up and will make sure to pack hard-cast bullets in his 10mm again. Lee estimated the grizzly to be 8 feet tall and that it weighed around 700 pounds. After a search of the area, wildlife officers never located a bear carcass or found a wounded grizzly. Lee Francis's attack was the second grizzly attack that week in Wyoming. The other was the grizzly attack on the 2 college wrestlers, covered in an episode on our channel. I've linked to that episode below for your review. I've also posted pics of Lee's gunshot wound on our Patreon page, linked below, because it wouldn't pass YouTube standards. In addition, I've added a link in the video article to the Bear Wise public notice from Wyoming Fish and Game, just in case you're considering visiting the area in the future. After reviewing the details of Lee's attack, I have a few questions for you. Would bear spray have prevented this grizzly bear attack? Did the hard-cast bullets drive the bear off of Lee? Do you think Lee hit the bear with any of his shots? Does the fact that Lee wounded himself during the attack affect your choice of weapons against a bear attack? I might have to think about it, honestly. I'll be glad to read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the Bow Valley in southern Alberta, Canada. We visited this area before in prior episodes, and once again the small town of Canmore is our focus. The mountains and plains meet right here and create a beautiful contrast in viewing options. To the west lay the Canadian Rocky Mountains with their high granite peaks and foggy valleys. To the east lays the vast Canadian prairie, with its rolling hills packed with trees, interrupted by swaths of agricultural fields and ranches. The town of Canmore lies within the Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative, which is a corridor that runs 2,100 miles between Yellowstone National Park in the U.S. and the Yukon Territory in northwest Canada. This area is one of the most intact large mountain regions and connected habitats in the world. The initiative seeks to limit further development of land within the proposed conservation district and was founded on data gathered from a collared wolf between 1991 and 1993. The wolf's name was Pluie. He was collared in southern Alberta, traveling more than 100,000 square kilometers in an area spanning 10 Yellowstone national parks in size. He was a bit of a nomad. His travels took him through Montana and Idaho, Alberta and British Columbia, Canada, crisscrossed private lands as well as tribal territories, before he was killed in a wolf hunt in southeast British Columbia. The tracking evidence taken from his travels was utilized to establish the Y2Y to protect broad travel routes for wildlife. As you can imagine, the policy changes required to support the Y2Y not only addressed the needs of wolves, but included grizzly bears, and that brings us to the subject of our episode. Bear number 148 was 6 years old in 2017. She had never had cubs, and was one of a handful of grizzly bears being tracked and monitored with radio collars in the area. Researchers noted that her sire, or father if you will, was bear number 122. He was a 660-pound boar that was the dominant male in his area. He had a fairly nasty attitude and was characterized as a bully. He was known to kill and eat black bears and was a prolific breeder, siring many grizzlies during his dominance. His toughness had earned him the nickname, the Boss, from researchers. Legend had it that he was so tough that he was once struck by a train and survived. Bear 148's mother was known as Bear 64 and was 10 years older than her mate. She was known for her gentle nature, tolerating people near her with a chuff before departing. She'd never been known to bluff charge people, instead opting to remove herself from their presence without any conflict. She was the fascination of photographers and visitors alike who watched her forage for food with enjoyment. Bear 148 had a littermate who was a male, and let's just say he took after his father a little too much. He was killed by provincial authorities when he was only 4 years old due to him picking up a liking for llama meat from a nearby ranch. That left Bear 148 the sole survivor of her small litter to find her own way among the residents of the Bow Valley. Now, Bear 148 was a peculiar bear in that the authorities described her as a good bear, meaning she got along with people for the most part. I would say she got along with people a little too well, as the following incident reports indicate. The province and municipalities within it work very closely in a bear hazing program. They track grizzlies after collaring them once they've had an indication they wander into human areas. Bear 148 sported some very high-tech jewelry around her neck, indicating she was just the type of bear that researchers wanted to learn about. When she was 3 years old, Bear 148 was booted out of the den by her mother to grow up on her own. That year she was chased away from Banff around 50 times, using barrages of rubber bullets, beanbag rounds, and cracker shells, which whistle and pop to frighten bears away. The provincial authorities were focusing on conditioning her to avoid human contact, and knew this may take a few years to do so. Each time she came near town, they would scare her away, only to find her popping up somewhere else, near people. She seemed to be comfortable around civilization, and oddly curious about people. There were some odd incidents involving Bear 148 over the next few years, like that time she followed a kick sledder for over a mile. The woman, who we will call Cindy, was driving her dog sled team along the Spray River Trail, which runs right behind the Banff Spring Hotel. Her kick sled team was zooming along when she heard the sound of a large animal following her. Cindy turned around to see Bear 148 trotting along behind her and her dogs. She immediately barked out the command for her dog team to speed up to avoid the bear. Interestingly enough, Cindy's dogs hadn't noticed Bear 148 following them. As her dogs turned to head fast, Cindy glanced back and noticed the bear had picked up her pace as well. Cindy was hoping this bear simply wasn't sure what she was following. She decided to stop her sled team and wave her arms to frighten the bear away and show she was a person and not another animal. She was a little over a quarter of a mile away from the parking lot when she did so. Before stopping, Cindy made sure to have her bear spray handy, just in case. As soon as Cindy stopped her dog sled, the bear paused and looked her and the dog team over for a while. Whenever Cindy began to leave again, Bear 148 followed from about the same distance as before. This happened every 150 yards or so on the way back toward the parking lot, before Bear 148 broke off the pursuit and wandered back into the forest without Cindy using her bear spray. When this incident was reported to authorities, they noted that Bear 148 sometimes acted curiously or aggressively toward dogs. She may see dogs as a threat, given their kinship to wolves, so the logic was based on facts, but didn't set anyone's mind at ease. In another incident, a man was walking his dog and a stroller with his child along a trail. Bear 148 was in the area, and the two met in a brushy part of the trail. The bear charged from the brush only to pull up several yards away and stare at the man. The look from the bear sent chills down the man's spine, but Bear 148 soon strolled back into the brush without further incident. A short while later, Bear 148 was involved in another, well, let's just say interaction, between herself and some hikers. She was doing her bear thing on the off-season trails of Mount Norquay ski hill. A young man named Keeney Campbell was adventuring with two of his friends along the trail system there. They'd brought along their friend's dog named Momo for a Sunday hike, with no weapons or bear spray. As the hikers rounded the very first turn in the trail, they glanced up to see Bear 148, only 20 feet away. The hikers decided they'd better make a methodical retreat back toward the trailhead and called 911 for assistance. They slowly made their way down the hill, through 14 inches of snow, but the bear's pace continually closed the distance between them. At one point, the hikers decided to stop moving backward to see what the bear would do. To their terror, the grizzly stalked even closer and had no intention of stopping her progress toward them. That is when Momo's owner decided to let her off the leash and see if she would drive the bear off. Snapping Momo free, the dog bounded off through the brush with the grizzly in close pursuit. As soon as the hikers saw the south end of that northbound grizzly, they sprinted for the trailhead. By the time the hikers reached the trailhead, Momo came barreling down the trail toward them, with Bear 148 in close pursuit. The bear had apparently chased the dog through the snow for a good 10 to 15 minutes, burning out a bit of its energy and extinguishing its curiosity. A Parks Canada employee was parked at the trailhead, and seeing the grizzly now charging toward the hikers, allowed them to shelter in the truck cab. The hikers watched from the safety of the truck, and the grizzly wandered around nearby for several minutes. Upon returning home, Momo was given her favorite meal of broccoli and eggs, as a thanks for saving the hikers' lives. Now I bet I have a good idea of what you're thinking, and I got to admit, I don't disagree. Bear 148 had demonstrated some fairly aggressive behavior toward people who were unarmed, even with bear spray. If she had done anything like what she had done to the previously mentioned people, to armed people, would she have learned a more painful and permanent lesson? Well, Bear 148 wasn't quite finished yet. She was captured and relocated to Kootenai National Park, about 30 miles west of Canmore. Authorities hoped that she would find a spot to settle in and make her home there, but the restless bear soon wandered back toward Canmore, despite their hazing program and surveillance of her every move. By the end of summer of 2017, Bear 148 had wandered a little over 20 miles down toward Canmore from the park. This put her into a different management jurisdiction, one more accountable to town residents. The national park authorities tended to tolerate her behavior much more than the provincial wildlife authorities. At a girls' rugby practice, Bear 148 had wandered onto the pitch and had sent a nervous energy through the ladies. The high school mascot was the Bears, so it seemed natural that her presence would be welcomed, but her bold approach to humans was very concerning. The boys' rugby coach was headed to practice at a separate pitch across town when he was alerted to Bear 148's presence on the pitch by a parent. He wasn't concerned too much, but his mood shifted once Bear 148 popped up from behind a tree. He was only about 90 feet from his car, and she was just a little farther than that from him. He was uncomfortable with just how much attention she was giving him just before she began to trot in his direction. The coach momentarily froze, then broke into an all-out sprint toward his car and the safety it offered. Once safely inside the vehicle, the coach called the girls' coach on his cell phone. He relayed the presence of the bear near the pitch. The girls grouped up and made sure to stay away from the bear as she sniffed their sports bags and generally investigated the scene. Observers noted she didn't eat any of the snacks the girls had in their bags, but investigated anything that had their scent. Practice was canceled until Bear 148 was verified to have left the area. In a prior episode on our channel, we discussed a grizzly bear confrontation between Leah McCroy and Bear 148. Leah was the daughter of Stephanie Doobie, who had died as a victim of a grizzly bear attack while trail running with some friends near Canmore when Leah was only 5 years old. When Leah was 17, she was jogging and surprised Bear 148. The bear acted aggressively toward Leah, who had escaped by sprinting away from the bear before being charged by it. The incident with Leah was the last straw with the provincial authorities. They had hazed Bear 148 for her entire independent life away from human areas, only to have her return. She'd been involved in many tense instances with outdoor enthusiasts, including one that ended with a standoff from only 1 meter of separation. Each time they mentioned euthanizing Bear 148, public outcry would force them to reconsider it, and the discussions of relocating her would be brought to the forefront of her management plan. As her altercations with people and their dogs grew in intensity, they decided to move her to Cockle Wildlife Provincial Park, about 400 kilometers north of Banff, near the border of British Columbia and Alberta provinces. After being caught, she was refitted with a new radio collar and flown to a chosen location within the park. She was tracked closely for the first few months and seemed to blend in with her new location quite well. For some reason in late summer, Bear 148 began to wander westward toward the boundary of British Columbia. In BC, grizzly bears are less threatened than in Alberta, so a hunting season is in effect during certain times of the year. With 15,000 grizzly bears in the province, hunting is a necessary tool in managing bear health and populations. Over 1,000 tags are issued each year to thin bear populations out, and only 25% of those permits are filled on average each year. The fall of 2017 would be the final grizzly bear hunt in British Columbia, and Bear 148 was walking right into the middle of it. Her radio collar was turned in by a hunter after Bear 148 was harvested. Her tense relationship with people had come to an end, without her ever passing on her genes to the next generation of grizzly bears. Researchers believe she may have been carrying her first litter of cubs when she was killed. Although Bear 148's history with people was tense, and even strange at times, she was viewed as a good bear by many citizens who observed her. It is still unclear to researchers why she continually moved into areas closer to people instead of remaining in wilderness areas when she was relocated there. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Do you think Bear 148 followed the hikers, kick-sledders, and other people out of curiosity, or was she developing a predatory pattern with them? Given that dogs were such a consistent part of her run-ins, do you think they exacerbated her bad behavior? Do you think the bear hazing and management plan of Alberta was a success or a failure in Bear 148's case? Is bear hunting a necessary part of management, or should it be done away with altogether? I will gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it.
Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.